And
Hello,
here come the
everyone.
people.
Gonna wait just a minute or two here.
Hello to the faces that we can see as well.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on the waiting room, but bienvenue. Most of you know me. I'm Erin from the Alliance Française, and I'm so happy to introduce Oliver Guy, an Australian in Paris, who used to be a full-time journalist in Paris, who then switched to podcasting in December of 2017. Oliver has lived in Paris since early 2015, and his story formed his book, Paris on Air, a self published memoir, and his award winning podcast, The Earful Tower. His podcast is his guide to Paris and usually features special guests to transport listeners there: tour guides, TV presenters, cooks and comedians, mayors and ambassadors. He's had lots of special guests. Since late 2020, the podcast has had a sister show, The Earful Sweden. Oliver has created over 250 episodes, as well as a children's book, Kylie the Crocodile, and a guide to Paris, and has many active social media accounts with wonderful, more visual content. So, Oliver, welcome and merci for taking us to Paris and distracting us from
Thank
everything else
you.
going on.
Thank you very much for having me, and hello to the faces that I can see, and hello to the people behind the screens without cameras. I figure if you are there and you have your camera off, I much prefer it if you dare to show your face, because then it feels like I'm talking to a room and I can see the way you guys are reacting and whether I'm making you laugh or whether you're switching off and getting bored. And there you go, some people showing up. Hello, Val. Uh, but it makes it more fun for me. It feels like I'm in a room. But as Erin said, my sort of goal or my idea, hello Yolanda, my idea now is to just try and give you a fun distraction, talk about Paris for 45 minutes, talk about some of the things that I do, and then hopefully have a lively Q&A where you guys ask me questions that hopefully aren't all about the virus and when you guys can get back to Paris, because I'm not an expert on that stuff. I'll let the spoiler out. I know probably as much as you do. But before we get into anything and before I try and entertain you, I just want to just get out of pure curiosity to know how well or how little the people whose faces I can see know what I'm all about. So out of the 10 faces that I see, if you already know everything about me and you listen and you've seen my videos, wave. One, two, maybe. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. And we got one of these from Mary. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I'll start off with sort of my own introduction and let you know what you're in for, and then I'll tell you some fun stories, and we'll see how it goes. And I'll be able to read the room based on whether you guys look like you're falling asleep or not. In fact, I might even call on you guys to see what your thoughts are on some things. But let's start off with the introduction. Erin said it pretty well, but I'll dive a little deeper. So for context, I came here 2015 to be a journalist, and a serious journalist. Like, it was a proper job, 9 to 5, in English, and it was very serious time. I think, I got into the serious stuff very quickly, but it was when there was all like the terror attacks in Paris, and a lot of the bad things were happening in that year or two. And I realized pretty quickly that I'm not a very serious guy. In fact, I was thinking about this the other night. I think I got into journalism to meet people and to tell stories, which I wasn't really doing anywhere near as much as I wanted to. So after 2 years in this job, or sort of towards the end of that 2 years, I started a podcast. And just out of interest again, if you listen to podcasts, can you just wave your hand so I know if I'm about half? Okay, so a podcast, just like a free radio show that comes out every week, but it's not on the radio, it's on like a special app. And I started doing this just for fun and interviewing people I'd met along the way. I'd talk to them for half an hour and release the episode every week. And then it was very weird how this happened, but it's a fun story. I think you'll like it. And hello, Steve, balancing out the gender equality here. Steve, welcome. A few more to go, I think. Wayne, video. I started making these episodes that I could see from the statistics started to get popular, but didn't really make sense. Just numbers on the screen, really. And then one day it changed, and this sort of changed my life the way that it happened. Is I was buying a coffee in one of these sort of expat coffee shops, and I still work as a journalist. It's just a weekend. Went in, paid for the coffee, spoke to the guy behind the counter in English, and then this guy who was sitting behind me turned to me. He goes Oliver. He said Oliver G, which is incidentally the pronunciation. He goes no worries. He goes oh, you're Oliver G, right? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I recognize your voice from your radio podcast from when you were ordering the coffees. And I couldn't believe it. I thought it was the most incredible thing. I'd been doing this show, didn't know really that anyone was listening to it. And I was like, yeah. And he kind of embarrassed me. Really, he turned to his friend, this is the guy we're telling you about, the Earful Tower podcast. And they all looked pretty, I don't know what he's talking about. It was pretty embarrassing, but I was really thrilled. And I walked out with the coffees. I sat down next to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and a friend. And I was on cloud nine, like I was sensing this possibility. And this is how it happened. I'm not exaggerating. Then I sat down with the coffees, and a woman on the other side of the road. And I'm gonna just for you guys in Milwaukee, I'm gonna do my American accent imitation so that you can feel that you're sitting there next to me in the coffee shop. This woman across the road goes, "Oh my God, you're Oliver G. It's Oliver G." I don't know that was all right. Yeah, some people laugh. And she ran over and she said, "Shall I still do it? I'll still do it." She goes, "Oh my God, I've based every recommendation, everything I've done on Paris has been your recommendation. That's why I'm here at this coffee shop. I bought this book. I did this tour." She listed everything that she did. And I was thinking, there was this sense of something in the air, which I figured was opportunity. The only thing is, I did the math in my head. I was so excited, and I was like, she must have spent thousands of euros in Paris, and I hadn't made a single cent. And I was like, okay, there's an opportunity here, and I need to figure it out. And more or less straight after that, I quit my job as a journalist totally, and tried to find a way to monetize a podcast, which is a weird thing to do. And it took me about 3 years to figure it out, and I've kind of figured it out now, and turned it into my career. So I don't do any journalism anymore. All I do really is interview people every week. And as I like to say, I share, the stories from the characters who make the City of Light shine every week. So that's who I am. And I figured I'd talk you through kind of some of the stories that I've got from it, how I made some books out of it, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. But have I lost anyone so far? Are you guys all still with me? Anyone who's confused? Anyone who's signed up for the wrong show here and are disappointed? Because now's the time to leave the room. It's not going to get any better than this. Okay, good. And there's chat. Oh yeah, I don't know if we mentioned, but we've got the chat there, and I can keep an eye on that too. And if there are any questions or you want me to repeat something, I'm quite used to doing the questions and talking at the same time. So I figure, I guess what I'm going to do is and the way that I'm doing this Zoom, sort of unscripted, but telling stories that I've told before, it's kind of what the podcast is like. In fact, whenever I have a guest on, they often email me or ask me before, not often, but sometimes they say, "Can you send me a list of the questions that you're going to ask?" And I say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't script them because I don't." I think the worst kind of interview that you could ever hear on a podcast or on the TV is the one where the interviewer doesn't listen to the guest. The worst thing that can happen is if I was to ask someone, how did you get into painting? And they say, "Well, I started when I was 4 years old after the snake attack." And then a bad interviewer will say, "Oh, that's very interesting. And what did you paint first?" And I'd ask about the snake attack, So that's kind of how I do the podcast. Is I don't script anything. I sit down. Usually we start talking about the weather or something like that, and just see how it goes. Um, but I'll tell you how the podcast evolved a little bit, how it turned into some books and some sort of concrete examples of how this became my career along the way. So the show kept growing from having at least those 2 listeners at the cafe until I don't know, it just sort of very steadily grew over these past 4 years. And every week I do the interview in this in Paris. They're called chambre de bonne, which is like a maid's quarters on the top floor. You walk up 7 flights of stairs. Very often they don't have elevators. Just out of interest, who's been to Paris before? So I know how much. Everybody. Okay, great. You all know what a chambre de bonne is, probably more or less. And I recorded them in this studio, and it was a very professional studio. And whenever there was like extraneous noise, like a police siren or something in the background, because Paris is quite a noisy city for that kind of stuff, often I'd stop and I'd be like, oh, we'll redo that bit. Let's get this perfect silence, like a professional podcast. Um, and then one day everything changed with that. And I think it really changed the whole show and took it to a new level. And that happened when I was walking up the street in Pigalle, which is sort of the red light district. That's irrelevant really to the story. I'm just trying to place it so you know what I'm talking about. And we were walking up the hill, me and my wife, and I saw across the road a celebrity in French circles, at least. I'm not sure if you guys will know who it is, but it was the supermodel. I think she gets away with supermodel, not just model, by the name of Caroline de Maigret, Caroline de Maigret. And she's if you haven't heard of her, she's the one that wrote that book, How to Be Parisian Wherever You Are. She's the ambassador for Chanel. She's in all these adverts and stuff. And she's got a pretty lively and large Instagram following. And I saw her across the road. I was like, oh my God, that's the supermodel. She would make a great guest on the podcast. So I just ran across the road, and this is a pretty good summary of how I get guests, or how I'm a bit sort of crazy or fearless or stupid when it comes to these things. I just ran up to her and I was like, hey, you're the supermodel, Caroline de Maigret, right? And she's like, yeah. And I said, you don't do podcast interviews with Australian journalists by any chance, do you? I was just trying to be fun and light. I didn't know what to say. And she sort of looked at me and sort of hesitated and said, well, I can give you my email address. And I was like, yeah, great. And then she sort of looked at me, and she saw my wife was there, and I guess she figured I wasn't a lunatic or whatever. She said, look, I'll be honest with you, this probably is never going to happen unless we do the interview right now. And I was like, what do you mean right now? She goes, you can surely record on your iPhone. We do it right now or never. There's the cafe. We'll go and sit and have a chat. And I was gobsmacked. Like this was right towards the beginning. This was a huge opportunity. Like the show was still quite small, and she was taking this chance on me. And this like top supermodel. So we walked it was like 100 yards to the nearest cafe. Meanwhile, I was Googling her just to make sure I could, remember exactly who she was, so I didn't ask any stupid questions or whatever. And we sat in this cafe, and I'm recording it just on my iPhone like this. And the waiter comes over. He interrupts to offer drinks. You can hear the espresso sound. It was so noisy. There were people talking everywhere. And I'm thinking, this is going to be terrible. No one's going to want to even listen to this because of all the background noise. Podcasts usually in the studio. And I put it out there, just what can I do? And I just got a ton of emails from people saying it felt like I was in Paris with you. I loved when the espresso machine went off. When the waiter came over, it reminded me of my trip to Paris. When the police car went past halfway through, it transported me to my honeymoon or whatever. And from that moment, pretty much on, I took the show out of the studio and started I'd rather interview someone sitting beside the Seine River, for example, or I've been talking to this guy recently who takes sort of photographs on rooftops. He climbs up on rooftops and takes these photographs of the skyline. And I'm going to interview him next week on a Paris rooftop, so you can hear the sound of the city. And I think it took the podcast to the next level because it became this immersive kind of experience. And then I kind of went crazy with it. So when we got married 2.5 years ago now, almost 3 years ago, I guess you guys don't know this, a lot of you don't know this, I have this little red scooter that I ride around in Paris. And for our honeymoon, we took this little red scooter that goes 30 miles an hour, and we went around the whole of France, 3,000 miles at 30 miles an hour through all the small villages, meeting all these people, going to all these like beautiful and famous towns, Provence, Carcassonne, Brittany, all this, doing these podcast episodes every week or so, just saying what we're up to. And that became a theme too. So when I got back to Paris, I'd do episodes from the scooter, going down the Champs-Élysées, talking to the guy in La Durée about the best macaron to get. And the show just kept growing. And so that takes us to about a year ago. And the New York Times did this big write-up about the podcast being, I think Karen or Corinne is nodding, maybe a New York Times reader there. And they said it was one of the most transportive podcasts on earth, which helped bring in new listeners. And next thing you know, it's become my fully fledged job. And very recently, I turned it into a company, which means I'm probably, for want of a better word, stuck doing it for a long time. So my hopes are, with you people who've never heard of me before, is that you'll start listening to the show and hopefully enjoying it. Now, I've already talked for 20 minutes. I want to give you an example of a fun story from the podcast and how it sort of changed my perspective of Paris and turned into 2 books. And I think if you don't like this story, that there's something wrong with you. How's that for confidence? So one day, it gives you an example of how the podcast is a little bit different. And I'm very conscious that there are people here who don't listen to podcasts at all. So I'll stop talking about that. Although I think you should listen to podcasts in general, because this one, if you like Paris, is perfect for you. A fun story is I'd seen a couple of years ago when I was sitting by the Canal Saint-Martin, where all the hipsters hang out, we're all sitting there, people were having a few drinks, and in the water, I saw what I was 100% sure was an enormous beaver, like a huge beaver. And in Paris, the only animals you really get are pigeons and rats. And I'm from Australia. I miss seeing exotic animals dancing around. And so seeing a beaver was like, I became obsessed with it. And I started asking all the people, do you see the beaver? The people along the canal weren't even looking. They didn't seem to care. So I got this kind of weird conspiracy theory vibe that there was a big beaver living in the canal. And you know, the podcast isn't just an interview with someone every week. Sometimes it's me chasing a fun story like this. So I went down the next day to the canal and I started interviewing people. Have you seen the beaver? Do you think that there's a beaver here? And I'm just asking questions, having fun. And then I found this elderly lady who was sitting there wistfully looking over the canal. And I just sat down next to her and I said, "Excusez-moi, madame, vous parlez anglais?" Because the show is in English, of course. And she spoke excellent English. And she said, yeah, how can I help you? In fact, she said it with a French accent, which I may as well do. We're having fun. We're meant to be having fun. She said, yes. She said, what would you like to know about the canal? And I said, well, first, I'm just interested, you know, do you like it here? What's your, you know, you're sitting here. It seems like you're having a nice time. Do you like it? Just warming her up, getting to the beaver question, right? And we exchanged pleasantries for a little bit. And then I said, do you think there are animals? And I know this bit like off by heart because, well, you'll see why in a second. Do you think there could be animals living in there? And she said, why, yes. There are birds, seagulls, there are fish. And I said, do you think that there could be a beaver swimming around here? And she said, well, yes. And then I was about to ask my next question about the beaver. And she just looked at me and interrupted. And she goes, there are crocodiles. And I said, crocodiles? And she said, yes. She kept going, yes. I said, what do you mean there are crocodiles? How do you know they're crocodiles? She said, I put 2 of them. I put 2 of them in there. And at that moment, I couldn't believe, as a journalist previous to, I couldn't believe what she was saying. And I was incredulous. What do you mean you put crocodiles in the canal? And I'll stop doing the French accent. She said, you know, she said, oh, baby, she said they were about this big when she got them, and they grew bigger, and she didn't want them in her apartment anymore. So she released them into the canal. And I was like, what, when did you do it? She's like, about a year ago. I was like, do you think I just kept asking questions, and she kept having like legitimately good answers to them. So I believed her. And then I turned the episode, of course, from being about hunting this alleged beaver into the crocodile. What happened there? And it just went down this series of rabbit holes that led me to one of the Paris mayor's offices. And I said, I went to interview him about something else for the show. And then I said to him, listen, there's a woman who said that she released crocodiles into the canal. What do you know about this? And he said, oh my God. He goes, it's just like 1982 all over again. I said, what happened in 1982? And he said, I've said too much. And then I was like, oh, wow, this just gets better. So I started digging around and talking to tour guides and experts. And in the 80s, they found, this is true. I'll tell you how it's true. They found a crocodile in the sewers near Pont Neuf, for a Nile crocodile that they found. And it had been eating the local rat population. And I Googled online, I found the old news stories. And in the newspapers that had been put online, it says that they sent this crocodile to an aquarium in France. And this was over 40 years ago, right? And or almost 40 years ago. So I was like, I've got to see what happened. So I started Googling aquariums or zoos in France with crocodile. And I found a hit in Brittany at an aquarium in a town called Vannes, Vannes. And this is all on the podcast episode, which I highly encourage you to listen to. I called Vannes Aquarium and I got him on the phone and I said, hey, is it true that in the early 80s, they sent a crocodile out to you from Paris? And the woman goes, you mean Eleanor? And I was like, yeah, Elliot, maybe, I don't know. Eleanor? She says, yeah, Eleanor. And I said, well, what happened? She says, she's still alive. She's 40 years old. We've made her enclosure to look, designed like the Paris sewers. And it's true. I went there and visited this crocodile, Eleanor, which, if you ask me, adds extreme sort of credence to my story about the crocodiles in the canal from 2 years ago. And, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I went looking for this crocodile and I thought it was such a wonderful story that it became a good chunk of the book I wrote about my life in Paris called Paris on Air. But more recently, in fact, 2 months ago, I teamed up with my wife, who's an illustrator, and we turned the story of the crocodile in Paris into a children's book, which I'm going to hold up and show you now, like a QVC commercial or something. Do you see this? Kylie, the crocodile in Paris. And this book, so it's kind of weird, like we had no idea really, we'd never written a children's book. We don't have children. We just experimented. And I wrote, it feels like I'm reading to children, but I'll read you the first page and give you an example. Do you see that? So it goes like this. In a Paris canal at the edge of the town, a scaly old creature is swimming around. You might see, if you carefully stare for a while, her crocodile teeth and her crocodile smile. And the whole book is just, it's the story of this crocodile going, Café de Flore. By day, she goes exploring Paris and she's kind of hidden around. And by night, look at this. Oh no, I'm going to show you my favorite page. And by night, she goes exploring in empty Paris. She goes through the sewers and pops out in the Louvre and looks at the Mona Lisa. Look, there's the woman getting the crocodile. And then here's the page of her growing. Look, she grew too big for the fish tank, too big for the sink, too big for the bathtub. Wouldn't you think? And you see this? Too big for the bathroom, too big for the hall. In each room, she reached from the wall to the wall. It's like that. It's kind of a bit like a cross between Eloise and Madeline for all you guys, or Madeline, for all you guys who've read children's books before. But I'm not going to go on about it. That is one way that I turned the podcast into a bit more than a podcast. And then the other book that I wrote, which I'll talk about for a couple of minutes before we switch to we're half an hour through. The other book that I wrote is my story. And this has been a real journey. In fact, I've met a lot of I don't know if you'd call them your colleagues at Alliance Française, but your fellow classmates, perhaps. I've met them all over your country, to be honest, talking about this, because I published it during the lockdown in Paris. And I spent a lot of the lockdown talking to different Alliance Françaises about it, because the plan was to do a huge book tour across the United States, and we'd planned it and we'd bought tickets, and we were going to drive from Seattle. We were going to come through Chicago, incidentally, maybe Milwaukee, but it was undecided. But from Seattle down to San Diego, across to Chicago, up to Boston and New York, and then down to Miami. And obviously, like maybe a lot of your holidays as well, that was canceled for us. So I've been doing it Zoom, which is also why I love when people have on their videos, because it feels a bit like, it feels a bit more real. But this book is, it's just the story of my time in Paris and, funny anecdotes and stuff. It's meant to be a laugh out loud book. And the top thing on the back here, look at this, one of our greatest Parisian voices, Caroline de Maigret, who you met earlier in my conversation. So imagine that. But I'll tell you a story from the book and from the podcast in an effort to make you think it's worth reading, and it's language related. So I'm sure you guys are all learning French or maybe speaking French. And those of you who speak fluent French will see where the punchline is going to be before the people who don't. So this will work differently on different people here. You can test your French, I suppose. But it's one of those stories where I look like an idiot, which is often the punchline in a lot of my podcast episodes too, unfortunately. But when I was learning French, I found that one of the quickest ways to improve was to really integrate myself with the locals. And I play a lot of basketball. And I found that there was this beautiful outdoor court in the Marais, which is just opposite. I'm sitting on the Ile Saint-Louis at the moment, and just across in the Marais, there's this, by the Saint Paul Église, the church, there's this old basketball court with this beautiful wall running along it, the Philippe Auguste wall. If you're new around here, that's one of my obsessions, and that's what Monday's upcoming podcast episode is going to be about, the wall. Please listen to that because it's one of my favorites. But anyway, I'm playing basketball with these guys, and I found that a really good way to improve my French was to parrot them. Anything I heard them say, I would say it too. And I did learn a lot of stuff doing it that way, but I learned that you can't take shortcuts. And this is how I learned. It turns out that in French, especially in Paris, that there are about, it feels like there's about 30 different ways to say the equivalent in French of the English word dude or man, Val is already laughing. I think she knows where this story's going. So I heard them all. There's words like a really common one is mec, M-E-C. Another one is gar, G-A-R-S, which is short for garçon, which I'm sure you know is boy. Pot is another one you hear a lot. Or poteau, bro, they say bro, but in a French accent, bro. There's all these ones that you can say. Mon grand, they call you like my big. So I'm just repeating these. I was just getting into it. And the more I listened, the more I heard that they would also say mon at the start. So, in America, maybe people will say, what's up, my dude? What's up, my man? Like that. So they say the same thing. They go, salut, mon grand. Hello, my big. Salut, mon pote. They say it for everything. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I'll repeat it. I'll parrot it back to them. And I said them all. Just as I thought that they were saying them. And that included saying mon mec, which I thought was fine. I said it all the time until one day, about 6 months after saying it all the time, I sent an email to a French friend of mine. I said, come into the studio at 8 o'clock. We'll do some recording. See you then, mon mec, my new thing. And he responded, don't ever call me mon mec again. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, mon mec is the only time you can't say mon at the front of it, because saying mon mec is the equivalent of saying my darling. And I suddenly paused and I thought, oh my God, for 6 months, I've been calling all the basketball guys my darling when I walked down the court and fist bumped them all and said hello. Said, hello, my darling. Hello, baby. I was essentially giving them a little, I don't know what I was saying. I was calling them my darling, and no one corrected me, probably because I was the stupid foreigner, or they thought I was into them, or who knows. But I guess the lesson is parrot as much as you can if you want to learn things, but be a little bit careful because you might embarrass yourself, as I did and as I continue to do. but there you go. That's the kind of story that I tell on the podcast. That's the kind of thing that's in the book. And I can highly encourage you not to call anyone Mon Mec unless they are indeed your darling. Now I realize I've been talking for 35 minutes, but I'm just going to look at the comments. Nothing's come in. Is everything flowing in the right direction? Are we enjoying it? Does anyone have any questions before I continue? A few sort of nods there. Who knew Mon Mec, incidentally? No? No. Well, you learn those ones the hard way, huh? Paula, where's Paula? Paula doesn't have a video on, perhaps? Oh, there you are, Paula. Hello. Paula's wondering about the new apartment. Well, I'll tell you, or at least I'll give you a very strong clue, but in a way that everybody can get something out of it, is I've been living in Montmartre, the famous cobblestone, beautiful, where the poets cried and the lovers dreamed, or whatever people say. I was living up there for the past 2 years with a view over Paris. It was a very small place, 30 meters squared, which I think is about 350 meters squared, which I bet is smaller than every single one of your houses, even just by looking at your Zoom background. We were in a tiny place, and we got extremely fortunate after the lockdown. What did that say? Oh yeah, okay. I'm just going to answer that question from Val. Did the lady confirm that a beaver is living in the sand? She didn't. She just went on to the crocodiles. So no. But anyway, so we're living in this tiny apartment through the lockdown, and I don't know what it was like in Milwaukee, but in Paris it was extremely strict. You could only leave for 1 hour a day to do exercise, or to go to the nearest food shop, or for medical reasons. So it was this really strict lockdown in a tiny apartment with me and my wife. And when it finished, like everyone in Paris sort of gingerly stepped out, like out of hibernation. And everyone was a bit off. A lot of people left the city and sort of fled to the countryside. And we got one of the most surprising and fortunate emails that we've ever received. It was from a company in Paris that does, I guess you'd call it luxury rental apartments for, I suppose, wealthy tourists. And the owner of it, or one of the people involved in it, sent a message, and she said, look, there are no tourists in Paris right now. All of our apartments are empty. And they said it very well, but they're like, look, we'd like to treat you to a few weeks on this 7th arrondissement. And there was no strings attached or anything, but obviously they expected that we'd take nice pictures when we were there. And we went there for 2 weeks, and as this deconfinement continued, when I say we went there, we went within like spitting distance of the Eiffel Tower. I'm not even kidding. Like, it felt like you could reach out the window and touch it, and it was life-changing. Not only because it was in the midst of this fantastic district, but also because it's probably never been so empty. So empty, and I'm not exaggerating, so empty that when we went for daily walks around it, there were no tourists. There were rabbits running around on the grass by the Eiffel Tower, like lots of rabbits. I found it fascinating. If you look at my Instagram story today as well, we saw a fisherman land like the biggest fish I think I've ever seen. Anyway, it was as big as me. Paris felt different. No tourists, no people. And it turned out the no people thing continued. As everyone knows, no one can come to Paris. So our 2 weeks in a luxury apartment turned into 2 months. It was just a total game changer, changed our whole life. And then when we went back to our small apartment, we got the news that my wife is pregnant. And now she's 6 months pregnant, and we realized that we needed a bigger space, which leads me to the question that came in from Paula: where are we moving? We're moving to the same district, the 7th arrondissement, right in the middle of, not in a luxury apartment, mind you, but in the same kind of area, and very close to where Napoleon is buried. So did you guess that, Paula? Did you already know? Maybe? No. So I put out a weekly newsletter where I haven't told this to anybody yet, by the way. This is a Milwaukee exclusive, but I've been teasing out where we might be moving to, and because it's kind of more fun that way, I think. And I just keep forget. Usually when I do these kind of talks, it's on my own podcast where I know that everyone kind of knows my story and my background. But I remember some of you guys have no idea who I am still. So I'm just trying to make sure I explain everything so it doesn't come across as weird. But on like Instagram, for example, there's like I think there are over 10,000 people following. So I put out these clues, and then you just get messages like this with people guessing where you're living. So I haven't been saying it to anyone. So to say it to you guys is quite a relief. I've been living with a secret. But in the newsletter that I put out every Friday, where I talk about Paris and things to do and everything, you guys should check that out. So at the end of it, I wrote a clue to see if anyone was reading carefully about where we'd be living. And I just told you guys that it's next to Napoleon's tomb at the Invalides. And I wrote in the newsletter, we're going to be moving near the grave of a very famous person. And I said that was the clue, but the next line was, sorry to keep it so short, which is a reference to Napoleon. A lot of people nodding there. And I got all these guesses for all over town, like, because there's so many famous people buried in the Père Lachaise and the Pantheon, the Pantheon, and so on. And I think there was only one person who guessed the whole thing. So there you go, Paula, you weren't one of them, but now you know. I think I'm going to switch over to. No, there's one more thing I'm going to say before I switch over to the Q&A. First, I have a drink of water because I'm losing my voice. And then I hope you guys ask me some crazy questions that make me squirm. Ask me anything. I'd love to answer anything. But I'm gonna do the shout out for the books that we're shipping from Chicago. Literally, my stock is with a listener to the show who's in Chicago, and you can buy them. There's a link. In fact, I think I've got it saved to share with you. And I've done these shows. It's very interesting to me, and I'm learning from it. I've done these kind of Alliance Française shows, maybe like 40 of them. And I never know what I say, whether it's going to turn into sales for books or not, new listeners or not. But I'm going to try something new with you guys and see if it works. What I've just linked to you, I hope you can see it, the eiffeltower.com shop. That's how you get it. And we ship it from Chicago. But this is what I want to try with you guys. There's one thing there that says the bundle, and it's 50 euros. But there's also one thing that says bundle Paris pickup for 40 euros. So it's 10 euros cheaper. And my idea is, if you, after the chat finishes, you can buy that one. And if you do it within an hour, you get it for 40 instead of 50. Otherwise, it's 50. I'll delete that thing. So I'll send you the link at the end. I'm going to try it, see if it sells any books. But otherwise, that's the link, and you can get all the different books in their various forms. Now, let's do some Q&A. I want to hear some questions. And I also want to say a special hello to, is it Karen or Karen? I'm guessing Karen.
Karen.
Karen. Okay, I want to say a special hello and a thank you to Karen, who I noticed via my emails right before I joined this Zoom appears to have become the newest Patreon member of the Eiffel Tower. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're very kind.
I'll show you too, Oliver. Hold on.
I'll explain what that means to you other guys in a second, but I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what
This
she's
is my
bringing
daughter, Sophia.
Hello, Sophia.
We are huge. We're huge fans.
I love it. Oh my goodness.
Now look.
Thank you so much.
You help me.
Thank you.
Well, then, I'm just going to mute S. Lewin there. Karen, no, you have to stay on for a second. Have you read those books? Yeah? Have we got to mute
Tell her
again?
to unmute.
You got to unmute. There you go.
We did it again. Yes.
Have you read it?
We read them both. And we love Paris on Air. Oliver, you're just always so optimistic and such a positive person. We love your stories about Paris, but we love your personal stories and your stories about you and Lena. We really, we enjoyed it so much. And especially
You're so kind.
The lockdown when, everything was kind of crazy. It was a fun book to read.
That is so kind, and that's much nicer for me, as I don't have to try and convince everybody else that it's a nice book, because hopefully you've just done it for me. But thanks so much for those kind words and for becoming a member as well. That's awesome. And I'm going to explain that to you guys now. I know a lot of you guys are super new to everything I do, but a question I often get asked, in fact, it's probably the most common question I ever get asked in my life, especially at weddings and stuff. When I meet people, this is how it goes. They go, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I've got a podcast." And often people mostly say, "What's a podcast?" I say, "Oh, it's like radio. It's like a radio that you can listen to on your phone." And they go, "Oh yeah." They go, how do you monetize a podcast? How do you make a living? And I think that they think that I'm like a sort of, like an amateur, I don't know, like a YouTuber or something like that. And they go, how do you monetize? I said, well, the way it works, as Karen has just found out, is that people become a member. And the way the membership works is like Netflix, it's not like Netflix really, but it's like a small monthly payment. But the podcast, everything I do is for free, except for members, I do extra special stuff. So I'm convinced I invented something called the Walk Show, which I talk about in the book. It's like a talk show, but while walking and streamed live onto the internet, but just for members. And what I would do is, like, if I have a guest like that supermodel, I've done it with that supermodel before. You do the podcast, it's free, it's fun, it's cool, lots of people listen. But then for the members, I go for a walk in her favorite neighborhood and show around. And just like on Zoom now, it's interactive, and people go, "Hey, what was in that shop? Go back." I go, "Oh, right, it's back here. We'll go have a look." And as it grows, the events are getting better. And I'm specifically telling this to you, Karen, as the newest member. The next event that we're planning, because Paris is so dead right now, the next event we're planning for the members is we're going to rent a small boat, like a jet boat, I guess you call it. Not a jet boat, but I don't know what you call it, a boat for 4 people that goes kind of fast. And we're gonna have a driver take us from, where the Statue of Liberty is in Paris, looking out over the Ile aux Cygnes, all the way down and around the Ile Saint-Louis back to the start again. And we're just gonna film it. We're just gonna film it and point to things, and the people are gonna be writing like, "Go over to the other island," and it's just things like that. Anyway, that's how I've monetized it. Thankfully, there are lots of people who've joined the membership. But I can tell you in all sincerity that for the first 2 years of the podcast, I was absolutely broke. And it made for some pretty funny walk shows because hardly anyone was watching. But Karen, I'm looking forward to seeing you on some new ones. I'll share the link to that too, but because most of you guys are quite new to it, I don't expect you to become members just yet, but it's something maybe in the future. Let's see the questions. Do we want to do it? Did I read them? I'll start off by reading them perhaps. Liani, has anyone tried to steal your moped again, or have you taken stronger safety measures? So it's a funny story, and it's even funnier because I'm in the process of writing my second book, and I've just been writing the story of how the scooter got stolen, and I've written it in such a ridiculous way involving Bruce Springsteen. Because yeah, exactly. It doesn't. The story. I'm quite hot in here. I'm getting too animated. The story doesn't really involve Bruce Springsteen, but I'll tell you all the kind of fun truth of what happened when my scooter got stolen 6 months ago. Is I told you guys I hadn't done a book tour across the States because of the virus, and I had been so pumped to do it that I'd gone into a thrift shop in Paris, and I found this big leather jacket that has the word in big red emblazoned letters USA on the back. And I plan to, and with a flag and everything, I plan to wear it on the tour. I don't know why. I would never wear an Australian flag jacket or a French flag jacket, but I just thought it was cool and it reminded me of Bruce Springsteen. And I bought it. It's kind of expensive, but I loved it. And almost as a sort of screw you to the man, when I was at the end of the lockdown in Paris, I met a policeman, and he said, "Hey," I said to him, "Can I go around delivering my books? I'm an author. Does that give me a reason to go out on my scooter and deliver?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't see why not." So I put the jacket on, even though it was quite hot, and I rode around Paris in this USA jacket, delivering my books in baskets that people lowered down. The reason I tell you that story is it's going to come back. So I was wearing this jacket, everyone in Paris in lockdown, standing on their balconies, looking at everyone because no one had anything to do. And flash forward to one day, I was sitting there just typing on my computer, and there's this huge commotion outside. This is when I was living in Montmartre on this hill going down into Paris. there's this huge commotion. People were yelling. And I'd get straight to the balcony and look down and see what was happening. But this time I just ignored it. I don't know why. And I'm typing, just ignoring it. And then there's a knock on the door. And we went and opened it, and it was the downstairs neighbor. And she says, who we hadn't met. And she was a couple floors down. She goes to my wife, she goes, your husband's the American, right? And she goes, no, he's Australian. She goes, he's everyone's saying the American. I was like, what? And I came out, and she goes, you're the American. I was like, what? And then I was like, so why are they calling me the American? And she goes, well, everyone on the street is saying that the American scooter has just been stolen. And I still hadn't figured out what happened, and I don't understand why I did this. Without even thinking, I just started running. And I ran down the 7 flights of stairs to the ground floor, ran out on the street, everyone's pointing down the hill, and I just ran, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do to confront this thief, but I just went for it. I got to the bottom of the hill, and it turned out that some drunk guy had been sitting on my scooter, which was unlocked, looking in the mirror, and then he saw that no locks were on, and he just went for a joyride to try and steal it. And by the time I got there, all the cops were there, there was this huge scene, but I got the scooter back and took it back up the hill. And when I got to the top of the hill, there was this guy across from us who I'd never talked to, but he was out on his balcony, and he goes, hey, it's you, the American. I was like, why is everyone calling me the American? He goes, for days we've been watching you in your Bruce Springsteen jacket going out on the scooter, and we couldn't do anything. So we just call you the American. And I was like, oh, well, thanks. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have got the scooter back. And that, my friend, is how Bruce Springsteen saved my scooter. And to answer the question, which I haven't done yet, Liani, is I still don't lock it properly, but it's such an unusual scooter that I think the typical thieves wouldn't bother thieving it, because they want to steal like the Vespers for the parts or whatever. They don't care for mine, and I'm quite happy about it. How was that for a story? That was all right. All right. Gail was yawning, but I'm just kidding. Susan says, how do you access the podcast? That's a really easy one. If you got a smartphone, I got an iPhone, but all smartphones work. There's always a free app. It's totally free. It's called Podcast. You see it there, the purple one. Every phone has it. Doesn't matter what type of phone you have. You go on it and you search for the Earful Tower. TheArful Tower. And then when you find it, which I'm doing now, so you can all do it with me if you want. You find it, you press subscribe. I'm subscribed to it. It's my show. And then you see, like, this is to give you an example of the kind of episodes I do. The last one was an interview with a man who sells silk flowers by the Place des Vosges. The one before that is called An Introduction to the Earful Tower, which I redid for all the new people who started listening. And then Understanding France's apéro tradition, when the Seine River floods, the ultimate Paris bucket list, how a best-selling author gets through a Paris lockdown. I think you get the drift. It's just a bit of fun. The whole idea is just entertainment. S. Lewin, I love all the podcasts too. Thank you. Paula, Oliver, do you think Parisians will be happy to have tourists return? Yes, because they absolutely rely on tourism. There are a lot of people, even in just cafes and bars and restaurants and tourist shops, tour guides who are out of work and struggling at the moment. Also, like today was really back to normal down by the Seine because there were so many people and it was so nice weather, but it felt normal and it felt good, and I can't wait for it to feel like that again because it's been a year. So when you guys all get back to Paris, you will be treated like kings and queens, I'm sure. What else have we got? How come no one's unmuting to ask questions? I love hearing voices. I want to hear a Milwaukee accent. I looked up Milwaukee before I talked to you guys just so I knew what it was famous for and stuff. And I clicked on the list on Wikipedia, on the list of famous and notable people from Milwaukee, right? And I was expecting to have 2 or 3 names. And it goes to a Wikipedia page with, I swear to you, it must have been like 900 names. And I was like, you can't include 900 people on your famous people's list. So I don't know who your most famous person is because I was rather disappointed with the Wikipedia page. But I was very surprised to see how close you are to Chicago. I had no idea. What is it like? Would it take like 40 minutes to drive there or something? 20? Well, okay. No more questions?
To an hour.
Up to an hour. Oh my gosh. Well, maybe I'll have to get my distributor in Chicago to skip the idea of driving books to you guys because that would be ludicrous.
Oh, no, come on up.
We'll see what he's up to. S. Lewin is in the Philadelphia or from the Philadelphia suburbs. Well, hello Philadelphia too. How about some questions? How about you guys who've been quiet? Surely you got a question about Paris or something.
I just asked how France compares to Australia, probably the
Oh yeah.
question, but
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is I haven't lived in Australia for like 10 years now. Like my whole adult life, I've been mostly in Paris, but before that I was in Sweden where my wife is from. So I'm really out of touch with Australia as an adult. And I haven't been back for like 5 years. So it's hard for me to compare it other to when I was a child there. But I tell you that Australia seems to me to be way more laid back. Australians are very laid back compared to French people. And French people care a lot more about traditions and culture, which we don't have in Australia, and a lot more about food in France. Those are big differences. Let's see. How about doing some virtual Parisian tours, says S. Lewin. I do it all the time, S. Lewin. That's my job. You can travel through your ears. I do them on YouTube too as well, but with a baby on the way and with writing books and all that, I mainly do them for Patreon supporters. So, but I mean, if you're new to my little world here, S. Lewin, and you go and look on my YouTube or my podcast or my books, there must be, I'd say, like about 400 hours worth of virtual Paris traveling, at least. It takes longer to listen to all the podcast episodes than to watch every episode of Seinfeld ever made. I found out once, and probably much more now. But there you go. Check it out. Check it out. Subscribe to it on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you guys do. In fact, that would be the ultimate request I have for you guys today, is to follow along on some kind of social media. So if you're not convinced by my podcast or my books, you might grow to like it and check it out later. What else have we got?
I have a question.
Yes.
So my mother and I were supposed to go to Paris last August, but of course, due to COVID, that got canceled. So now the conference that we were going to go to has been rescheduled, but for next year, 2022, August. Do you think Parisians will still shut down and go on holiday? Because that's what we're worried about. We're going to get there, but then all the, smaller cafes and everything are going to be closed.
What's the specific reason you were coming for? Was it just holiday for fun?
No, it's Toastmasters International Conference. They do a conference in different places every year. So they always do it in August, but they picked Paris for 2022.
I think people are quite divided. Some people love Paris in August because it really does get empty, and I have no doubt that in 2022 it'll be just like every other year. But some people love it and some people hate it. But there are always things open because a lot of people stay and a lot of tourists come. I love it in August, and most of the small cafes, not most, but lots of them stay open because they need the money. Like it'd be crazy to just, you'll be fine. I've stayed in Paris for August several times. I really like it. You get to walk around without all the like the hustle and bustle that's usually there. It's kind of a really nice time to come. So I'd say count yourself unlucky that it was postponed, but lucky that you'll be here in August, according to me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No worries. Val, are you seeing any advancements on the reconstruction of Notre Dame? I'll answer visually. If you check the latest YouTube video that I put up, I got a new camera with like an extraordinary zoom, and I just went down there and I zoomed into it for a couple of minutes. So you can see it looks like it's advancing, but it's going to be years before it gets back to normal. And if you can't find the video, it's my latest video, and the title is something about Shakespeare and Company. It's me walking to the Shakespeare and Company bookshop to sign some books, but on the way I stopped at Notre Dame for like 3 minutes and just filmed. And let me say, don't let that signed books at Shakespeare and Company encourage you to buy it from Shakespeare and Company. Buy it from Chicago. I shouldn't have said anything. Forget Shakespeare and Company. Good. What is your Instagram account name? The Earful Tower. I'll write it. Everything is the Earful Tower, which is a little play on words for the Eiffel Tower, but for your ears, the podcast. I'll see you there, Bob. You say I just put a picture up right before we. Hello, Bob. Was that your question, Bob? Come on, you can do another question. You got something better than that, Bob. What's the Instagram account? Okay, well, you found me. Hey, is anyone else going to unmute and say hello? We still got like 2 minutes.
I asked so I can sign up right now.
Oh, you're very kind.
I found you.
Oh, brilliant. Do you see the picture I put up of Notre Dame an hour before? Look at that. The sun just hit it. Sunset. The whole street was dark, but then the sun hit the Notre Dame. Beautiful. No more questions? I'll do my final. Hang on.
Are you working on any other books?
Yep, we've got a new children's book on the way. It's also about an animal. It's not based on a true story like the crocodile one, and we're super excited about it. I'm not going to reveal what animal it is, but it will take everyone by surprise. You would never guess. No one in this room would guess what animal it is. I'm completely confident. It's a bit unusual, and I've been working a lot on the follow-up to Paris on Air because I'm convinced that I've just lived in Paris through one of the most strange and unusual times that it's been through, definitely in recent history, maybe, I don't know, maybe ever. And it's meant to be kind of like what Karen said before, it's meant to be an uplifting and sort of positive and joyful distraction from all the bad things that happen there. You know, it's like I talked to you about seeing the rabbits at the Eiffel Tower, like that kind of thing of Paris, which is really interesting compared to, it's not just going to be like, oh, everyone's losing their jobs and so on. It's you know, it's meant to be a bit of fun. And if you like Paris on Air, I think you'll like that one, but there's not really much point in me promoting it because it's not going to be ready for a little while yet. Last call for questions. Here we go. What have we got? I felt like Steve Allen was about to ask a question.
Yes, I have one quick question. Where is your favorite place to buy a croissant in Paris?
Good question. I think in all seriousness, I don't think you can go wrong. I would be happy with any croissant from Paris as long as it's like a proper French one. But if you want a good sort of, I think they're meaty, not meaty, but a good strong one, so delicious and heavy and plump that it could be used as a weapon almost. There's one called Storer, Stohrer, Stohrer, on Rue Montize in the 2nd arrondissement, and it's the oldest bakery in the city. I'm not just saying it because it's like a tourist thing. I lived 200 yards from it. In fact, those of you who read Paris on Air, that's where it kind of starts. It starts with my proposal to my wife, which was very romantic. But then it goes to my house on Rue Montize in the 2nd, and that bakery was one of my favorites. And I sincerely recommend those croissants. But it's like a meal. You could almost have it for dinner. So you've been warned. Don't eat too many. I don't want to see you, you know, not fitting in your seatbelt on the flight home, Steve. All right.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm going to do I think we've run out of time basically, but I'm going to do my last shout out on the Eiffel Tower shop, the eiffeltower.com/shop. If you want to get it cheaper, as my thanks to you for listening. And I've never done this before. So if this doesn't work, I'll feel embarrassed. But there's one, I'm going to click it too so I can walk you through it. There's one that says Paris pickup for the book bundle. And that usually is where they go and pick it up from a Paris coffee shop that I store them at. But if you guys get it, I will send it to you at that price. Otherwise, you'll have to get it at the price that's the normal bundle price, which is 10 euros more expensive. Sounds like a deal to me. And sorry to Karen, who probably bought it before that discount was offered, but it seems like you enjoyed it. And Sophia. But look, that's my thank you for listening, is giving you the opportunity to get it at a cheaper price. If you like the show, I hope to hear you listening in the future. And if not, well, if you don't like the show, don't listen to it. And thanks for listening to this chat. But there you go. Nice to meet all you guys.
And merci beaucoup for joining us, and stay in touch.
Yeah, I'd love to. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Bye-bye.
Bye.